Hey, it's Craig and Chelsea here from Power FMSA in Murray Bridge.
Welcome to the Quarter Hour with Wade Kingsley.
How lucky we are to be here.
Is this Kingsley our listener from Murray Bridge?
No, we actually do have a very passionate listener called Kingsley from Murray Bridge who picks up the bins. He's a garbo.
He takes the garbage away, and if you think about it, that is exactly what Wade Kingsley does. He takes the garbage away from the radio industry and just explains it so nicely.
And aren't we better for it?
So true, and he wraps it all up in 15 minutes, so we better go so that he can do that.
Follow us at Craig and Chelsea on Instagram, and here is the Quarter Hour podcast.
Oh, thank you very much, team. That's a beautiful intro. Appreciate it. One of the best we've had. For Data, the operating system for modern media where you can unify your audience data, automate workflows and engage fans. That's Audata, AUDATA.io. Dear listener, this is the Quarter Hour, the radio podcast for radio people. Well, ARN, aren't they having a week, a month, a year, a few years? And yesterday on the stock market, they really experienced probably the worst news. To break it down, the Australian Financial Review's media and marketing reporter, Sam Buckingham-Jones. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Wade.
Thanks for joining me. Are you in a courtroom?
I'm in a meeting room next to a courtroom. This is,
Right.
You answer the call wherever you are, and I just happen to be at court today. So, in it for the game.
I've got a feeling for the media beat, you might have to just stick around a courtroom for a few months. That might be a good place to be.
I've had my fair share of courtrooms. Lachlan Murdoch suing Crikey for defamation. It always ends up in a courtroom somehow in media.
Yeah, it does. Well, I mean, funnily enough, the word media is in mediation, so I don't know if we're going to get that with Kyle and Jackie O, but what I'm really interested in is your piece this morning in the Fin Review, which was a great one, really just talking about where to now for ARN. So from a layman's perspective, they've lost pretty much 3/4 of their market value over the last few years.
Yeah, roughly since this deal was signed, ARN was a $300 million company, and yesterday it closed at less than $75 million, which is a staggering amount of value to lose over such a short time. I mean, the entire media ecosystem has been battered by an ad market contraction, but ARN in particular has become almost uninvestable, and its investors are voting with their wallet, which essentially means that this company that has $280 million in revenue a year is now worth less than one Kyle or one Jackie O in terms of their contract. So it's a remarkable contraction, and it's a really shitty hand to be dealt if you are Michael Stevenson, who's just come in as the new CEO.
Yeah. And also Kerry Elstub, Chief Content Officer, and Dave Cameron as Head of Broadcast Content, because effectively they've got to solve other people's problems. Now, on one side of the ledger, they're a publicly listed company. These people as executives get paid well compared to the average income to fix these problems. But fair to say they've got bigger than the average problems at the moment. And I'm just wondering how ARN find their way out of this mess financially, because let's just say they settle with Kyle and they settle with Jackie O. I don't think anyone realistically believes they'll be back on the air, particularly not Jackie, but certainly not Kyle, I don't think. But like a layman's question is, can they afford to settle with them? Like, do they actually have the funds? I know we've talked previously about how they'd go about this, but it's really like getting worse by the week.
Yeah, I mean, I think no one wants to invest in them at the moment because of the potential fallout from two massive, compensation claims that are currently, if they got everything they asked for, it'd be $160 million. And again, this is a company worth $75 million. It has, as I said, a lot more in revenue. There are deals you could strike, you could do, it's almost like winning the lottery in a way. It could be a couple of $1 million each a year for the next 20 years or something like that. There are ways you can strike deals that are possible. I don't think Kyle or Jackie O want to end up owning the network, which is something that's been speculated. And that happens. Channel 10 went into liquidation back in the teens, and a US company called Viacom CBS ended up owning them because they were owed the most money by 10. And that's just how that process worked out. I don't think Kyle and Jackie O want to end up owning KISS necessarily, as much as they might sort of put that speculation out there. So there are ways this deal can be struck. I think what's next, what's the big things that someone like me is looking for, and I assume you as well, is what does KISS do now from a programming perspective? Because they now have this window where it's a crude way of saying it, but the cancer has been cut out. Like the bit that has been absolutely pulling them down with advertisers has been shafted very publicly and very high profile and high risk way. And now they have to come up with a new breakfast show to put into the most important slot on KISS FM. That breakfast show will have a hefty amount of responsibility for driving revenue that will help get them out of the hole that they've dug themselves into. So it's essentially, this could be a year or two of legal battle. What will ARN do in that year or two to turn the tables? Can they make a reasonable amount of money so it's possible for them to find their way back out of this pit?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that the challenge is when you're a public company is all eyes are on you every single day. The ASX opens and people are price watching, as you are on the media beat. But also when you think about ways you can stabilize a share price, usually the levers that the share market and shareholders respond to are one of two. One is cost. How can we control cost? Which sadly could mean more job losses at ARN. It could mean that they make an announcement saying they're trimming the workforce to stabilise the share price. Another one is a positive announcement, which is here is our Sydney Breakfast Show replacement, the all-new brand safe, whoever they're going to be, and the Melbourne Breakfast Show replacement, which I guess arguably has more upside because Melbourne was performing so poorly that if they had a couple of Melbourne established personalities, names I'm hearing like Jules Lund, Lavinia Nixon, maybe some people that are instantly brand safe, positive, well-liked people that would go straight into Melbourne, there could be some immediate cash flow and revenue upside into Melbourne, which might help stabilise the whole ship.
I mean, the chances are whoever they pay for both Sydney and Melbourne is going to be paid a lot less than Kyle and Jackie O were.
I think so.
So if they can hold on to even a portion of the audience, they will lose a lot of the audience who are rusted on Kyle and Jackie O people, right? Like I've written that this is this unusual moment where the breakfast audience in Sydney is up for grabs. But you're right. We look at ARN with so much more scrutiny than we do Nova. Like I often forget that Nova is the sort of big third player here because I'm so focused on Southern Cross and ARN as listed companies. And I often describe Southern Cross as ARN's major rival when Nova has been making huge gains. KISS has been doing, sorry, not KISS, Smooth has been doing very well. And Nova has got a new breakfast team in this year. So, they're sort of making a pretty big bet that they'll be able to scoop up some of Kyle and Jackie O's audience. Not that they knew that when they brought it in. But I think, the biggest things Kerry and Dave Cameron would be thinking about now is what to do in Melbourne and who the heck can we put into Sydney who is palatable and high profile enough to follow the king and queen of Sydney radio.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Your pieces in the Fin Review have been fantastic. I really love the fact that you kind of explain what's going on from the business perspective. So thank you for all your work. Last question on the media beat. Can you think now, if you were to think back over the time you've spent on media, is there a bigger story than this? Because if you think about the trajectory of like the thing that jumped out to me over my cornflakes this morning when I was reading your piece was the 75% loss of that company's market cap over the last few years. That you could plot it on a graph, sign Kyle and Jackie O, sign the contract, they announce it. And then from there on, it's a steady decline and largely, at the hands of the content that was being put out by Kyle, more so than Jackie, but let's just call it the show. Can you think of a bigger media story than this ever? I'm really struggling to find one.
It depends who you ask. I think from a pure readership entertainment perspective, no. I think it's probably one of the most consequential media stories, one of the most consequential things to happen to an Australian media company in the past decade. The other things that I think of is Meta pulling out of the news media bargaining code, which is much more sort of boring in a way, but it is also hundreds of millions of dollars that helped build up the Australian media market that was sort of ripped out. So if I think of stories that I've written that are memorably big ones, that was certainly a massive one. Otherwise, I honestly think, we've spoken about this. I wrote a profile of Kyle a few years ago, and it was the most useful profile to have written, because it's not like I couldn't have predicted this is where it'd end up a few years later.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the more well-equipped people to report on the implosion of Kyle and Jackie O, simply because I sort of had to get to know a whole bunch of the people in it. But yeah, I think this is the record low of ARN in its entire life. And that's not a pleasant place to be. And in a down market, it didn't need further weights pulling it down. And somehow, this management and board of ARN has managed to do that.
Okay, well, still plenty of the story to be written. And Sam, your columns and pieces in the Fin Review, both during the week and on the weekend, and afr.com are must reading for anyone who's interested in what's going on in the business side of media. So thank you for that. And also, please stay on the right side of the ledger in that courtroom. Don't drift into the dock, will you?
As I said, it's inevitable in media you end up in a courtroom. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen to me. Yeah.
Okay, well, wishing you luck. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Wayne.
Sam is great. Please check out afr.com to see his latest reports. And he really explains what's going on from a business point of view. And I think that's really important to understand, because there's so many angles to this story. There's obviously the stuff we read in the more tabloid kind of press about, is Jackie getting her hair done? Is Kyle selling his house and having to pay his mortgage? But the reality is it's a business. Kyle is a business, Jackie is a business, and ARN is a business that employs lots of great people. And despite all the bad news and stuff, we really hope for the best for the people within ARN, because the leaders there have certainly got a challenge on their hands. No doubt they're up to it. But there's a lot of people relying on some good decisions being made next in what happens, particularly for KISS in Sydney Breakfast and Melbourne Breakfast. And meanwhile, you've got great things happening like Ben and Liam launching earlier today in Adelaide on KISS. They've sort of relaunched the station there. So good luck to Ben and Liam as they go back to their hometown and try and take on the breakfast market there. Also, they've got some good news stories with Christian and Gold. I mean, Sydney ratings are obviously going to take much longer than some people thought, but I think that Christian will get there in the end. He just needs to win over that Sydney audience. And he's obviously still doing very well in Melbourne. So lots of good news for ARN. But obviously the thing that's really taking up the headlines at the moment is, unfortunately, the terrible state of the finances. And a good couple of positive announcements about new shows could turn some things around pretty quickly. But yeah, they'd want to get on with that, I think. Hey, I've got an announcement to make. This is the first time the quarter hour is breaking format. We're going to do a longer form interview because I think this person is absolutely worth it. So April is a pretty significant month in Australian radio for a number of reasons. One, it's 25 years since the Nova network started in Nova Sydney, Nova 969. And also 5AA in Adelaide, my hometown, is their 50th birthday. And you would have heard the interview I did with Craig Munn from 5AA a few episodes back. If you haven't, go and have a listen. Just some interesting history there. It got me starting to think about how brave radio is now. How brave, really? How courageous is it? How much are we taking risks? Which is ironic when you think about Kyle and Jackie O, right? Probably one of the biggest risks was putting them into Melbourne, and it didn't work. But I was trying to think of the people in the industry that are famous for risk-taking, whether it be earlier in their career as on-air or programmers and then as CEOs. And really, the name that goes straight to the top of the list is the one and only Paul Thompson. And I'm pleased to announce that in an exclusive, he's going to sit down with me for a longer form interview where we talk about bravery in radio. We talk about some of the decisions that he made over his career with obviously a great team around him. And we also talk about bravery in radio now, because arguably with more clutter and more complexity and more channels and more content than ever before, wouldn't you think radio needs to be a little bit braver rather than be a little bit safer? I do. But I'm going to chat to Paul about that. I'm going to sit down with him in a week or so, and we'll bring you that extended exclusive interview on the quarter hour very soon. It's going to be the first of a series. We're going to start sitting down with some people who've got big opinions about things that are going on in the industry, me being one of them. I've got some opinions. I'm always happy to share those, but it's always good to get some other people on too who have got interesting things to say about what's going on in radio. So it's the first of a series. We'll do bravery as the theme with Paul Thompson, and then we'll have some other themes coming up very soon too as we build out the quarter hour, because this is the radio podcast for radio people. If you work in the industry and you love radio like I do, then hopefully you're loving the content we're putting out. If you'd like to be a P1, just go to thequarterhour.com. We're getting more and more P1s signing up every day. They're the most loyal fans of the pod. They're the ones that we get on the WhatsApp. We chat about all things radio, and you can do an intro like you heard at the start of this episode, or you might even be able to come on and be a co-host soon. That's another thing I'm announcing soon. I sort of just did then, didn't I? I'm not very good at hooking and teasing. Well, I am, but I'm kind of giving it away at the same time. All right, that's enough from me. It's a quarter hour, so I've got to wrap it up. Dear listener, thank you for all your support this week. See you soon.